Hi, I'm Jane from Poppy Patchwork, and in today's video I was going to show you how to finish the Cloud9 quilt with sashing, cornerstones and borders. But unfortunately the quilt is still with the long arm quilter. I was meant to collect it this weekend, but things didn't pan out that way, and I'm now going to receive it in the post this week. So I'll be able to finish the video and get it ready for you next week. In the meantime, I'm going to show you how to make this heart. It's the Be Mine heart and it's made with foundation paper piecing. Hi, I'm Jane from Poppy Patchwork, and in today's video I'm going to show you how to make this Be Mine heart. It is foundation paper piecing, and the method I'm going to use involves no ripping out of paper, which I think is really good. That's the one downside of foundation paper piecing, in my opinion. So let's get quilting. Step 1. Choosing the pattern and fabric. I've chosen this pattern called Be Mine, and the link will be in the description below. And the fabrics I've chosen are from my French General fabric stash. Step 2. Cutting out your fabrics. In background fabric, you're going to need one 2.5 inch square, and you're going to need to cut this across the diagonal. You're going to need one 5 inch square, and again cut this across the diagonal. And you're going to need one 3 by 3.5 inch piece. In fabric A, you're going to need one 3 by 3.5 inch rectangle and one 1.5 by 5 inch rectangle. In fabric B, you're going to need two 1.5 by 5 inch rectangles. In fabric C, you're going to need two 1.5 by 5.5 inch rectangles. In fabric D, you're going to need one 2 inch by 5 inch rectangle, and in the main fabric you're going to need one 5 inch by 8 inch rectangle. I also made notes on the sheet provided in the PDF, labelling where I was going to put the fabrics and measuring out how big to cut them. Step 3. Cutting out the pattern pieces. So what we need to do is cut out these pattern pieces, and on your pattern you'll see that you've got the main lines and also a line 1/4 inch away, and that is the line we need to be cutting out because that's got the seam allowance. So now we have the 3 pattern pieces. We've got A, B and C. Some useful items for foundation paper piecing include a simple glue stick to keep your paper and fabric together, a seam roller to press the seams so that you're not jumping up and down to the ironing board, and a sewing wheel marker. This is an item that's got spiky wheel but quite dull spikes on it, and it simply perforates the paper. Step 4. Perforating the sewing lines. So the next thing we need to do is perforate all the lines that we're going to be folding. So I'm using this little gadget here, and I'm just going to run it across the page a couple of times. Step 5. Folding the pattern pieces. And now we're going to fold along those perforated lines. Now, by perforating the lines, it does make it easier to fold them. And you'll notice that I'm folding them in on top of them, so I'm kind of folding them right sides together. Step 6. Foundation paper piecing by folding the paper, not sewing on the paper. So now we're going to start on piece A, and I've got my background fabric and my fabric A, and these are going to be joined right sides together. And then I'm going to fold along the line between A1 and A2. And remember, A1 is the background. So before I put that on the fabric, I'm just going to put some glue on the back of this piece of paper so that it sticks to the background fabric. And I'm going to eyeball about 1/4 inch seam there. So I think that's about 1/4 inch, just bring my ruler in. A little bit more, I think. I'll go with that. There we go, that's about 1/4 inch there. I'm going to press that down so that it sticks to the background fabric, and then I'm going to use this clip just to attach everything together and take it over to the sewing machine. So I've changed the foot on my sewing machine, so I've got the open toe foot, and I'm going to be sewing just to the side of the paper fold, not going through the paper, just to the very side of it. I'm going to go very slowly. So I've got nice and close to that. I'm going to flip the paper back, and I'm going to flip the fabric back. And now I'm going to finger press, and now I'm going to roll of that seam. And then what I'd like to do is just put a little bit more glue here to keep everything secure. So those are the two pieces attached. Now I just want to shape them. So I'm going to flip it back over, and now I'm going to cut along the edge of the paper, because that's the edge of this seam allowance. So that's the background fabric trimmed. And then we're going to move on to do the piece now between A2 and A3. So I'm going to fold that back, and this is when I can now trim this. So I'm going to lay the ruler. I've got the 1/4 inch line of the ruler lined up against that fold, and now I can cut this. If I flip that back over, you can see that it's now beginning to take shape. So we're now going to be adding the next fabric. So fabric B. So these are all my pieces. So now I've got my fabric B, and I'm going to place it right sides together, and I want to make sure that it's got enough fabric when I take it back over here. So if I extend the paper out here, I can see that the fabric does come out beyond this point. So I'm going to put this binding clip in to hold it all in place and take it over to the sewing machine. So I'm now going to flip the paper out, and I'm going to flip this out. I'm going to give it a finger press, and I'm going to roller that seam. And once again, I'm going to put some glue behind it just to keep it all in place. So now I'm able to shape it. So I'm going to flip that over, and again I'm able to cut along this paper edge because that has the seam allowance on it, and I'll do the same on this side. So now I'm ready to go to I've done 1, 2 and 3, and now I have to do 4, which is the background fabric. So for the background fabric, you need one of those small triangles. So what we're going to do is we're going to fold the fabric here along that seam, and now we're going to trim that so it's a 1/4 inch away from the fold. And then we're going to place this piece right sides together. Now grab my clip it together and take it over to the sewing machine. So I'm back at the cutting board, and I'm now going to finger press this piece out, and I'm going to use the seam roller on that seam. And I want to put a bit of glue on here. Before I do that, I'm just going to check that it is in the line. Now, you can see it's not perfect, And if I'd held that up to the light, I might have been able to see. But I think it's going to be okay. If you find it isn't going to be okay, you may want to unpick that and do it again. So I'm just going to trim that. So again, lining the ruler up against the edge of the paper. And to keep it all in place, I'm going to pop some more glue on it. Now we're coming back to do 3 to 5. So I'm going to fold that in, and I'm now going to trim this to 1/4 inch away from the fold. And the fabric is now the C fabric, which is this fabric. So I'm going to fold that fold between 3 and 5, and I'm going to place it right sides together. Now we need to make sure that we've got enough fabric, so I'm just going to move it down a little bit to make sure that when it all unfolds, I've got enough to cover it. So that should be enough. I'm going to clip it and take that over to the sewing machine. So I'm back at the cutting mat. I'm going to flip this piece out, finger press it, and seam roller it. And it is in the right place. So what I'm now going to do is just trim the sides. So trim along the edge here. And trim along the edge here. I'm just going to pop another bit of glue just to secure this one. And we're now ready to put A6 onto it. So I've folded it back between A5 and A6, and I'm now going to trim that 1/4 inch away from the fold. And now we're doing fabric D. So I'm going to lay this right sides together, and I can decide which way up I want the medallions to be. I think I want them that way. And I need to make sure that I've got enough fabric at this end. And I can see here, that's the end there. I might take it down a little bit more. Bring it up a little bit. There we go, I'm happy with that. So I'm now going to clip that into place and take it over to the sewing machine. So once again, going to flip out the paper and flip out the fabric. I'm going to finger press that, and then I'm going to use the seam roller on the seam. Again, I'm going to put a little bit more glue on there to keep it in place. And now I'm going to shape it. And now we're ready for the last fabric piece for this section, and that is A, B, C, D. We're back to A. So before we can place A on here, we need to trim this. So lining up that 1/4 inch line on the ruler on the fold and trimming the fabric. And now we can line this up, right sides together, and again making sure that the fabric is going to cover the paper. Pop a little clip in that and take that back over to the sewing machine. So I'm going to flip the paper out, and I'm going to flip the fabric out. Do a finger press, and now I'm going to roller that. I'm going to put a little bit of glue just to keep everything in place for the moment. And then I'm going to do the shaping. So that is piece A complete. It's looking really nice, and the points down there are looking really lovely. So we're going to put that to one side, and now we're going to work on the B pattern piece. So moving on to piece B, I've got my main fabric right sides together with my background fabric. And this should line up and I think these come over a little bit more. So I'll bring it over a bit more again. Okay, so that looks good. Now I want to put a little bit of glue on here. want to place this about 1/4 inch away from the edge of those two fabrics. Put a binding clip in that, and then take that over to the sewing machine. So I'm going to flip this all back. I'm going to finger press that seam and just then seam roller it. And if I turn it over, I'm now able to start shaping it. So I'm going to pop some glue behind here. And now we're ready to do 3, which is attaching a large triangle piece of background fabric. So I'm going to fold this back, and now I'm able to line the 1/4 inch line up on the fold and trim that seam. And with right sides together, I'm going to place 2 fabrics together, lifting that up. I'm happy with that, and I'm going to put a clip in that and take it over to the sewing machine. So now I'm going to flip the paper out and flip the fabric over. I'm going to finger press that and then use the seam roller. And I want to put a bit of glue behind the fabric. And now it's all in place. I can flip it over and just shape that piece. So now we're ready to put B4 onto B2, and that is fabric C, which is the pink one here. So before we can do that, we need to trim the seam allowance. So lining the 1/4 inch seam up on the fold, I'm going to trim that fabric down. And now I can lay this right sides together. It feels like it could do with a little bit more glue. I'm wondering if my glue is particularly sticky. Let's put a bit more on it. So I'm going to go right sides together and now I made a mistake there. We're doing this seam, so I'm just going to, that is B2 to B4. I trimmed the wrong piece before. Let's trim it now. And this should make more sense. So we're putting those two pieces together, and when I flip it open, then they should be fine. So get my clip it into place and take it over to the sewing machine. I'm going to flip the paper and I'm going to flip the fabric. I'm going to finger press that and then seam roller it. I'm going to pop a bit of glue in there just to keep it all in place. And now I can shape it. And so we're going to do the final piece, which is B4 to B5, and that is fabric B, which is this one here. So before I do that, I need to trim its seam allowance. And lay this right sides together. Yep, I'm happy that that's going to be in the box when I flip it over. So I'm going to clip it together and take it to the sewing machine. So I'm going to flip the paper and flip the fabric. And once again, I'm going to finger press. I'm going to roll the seam. And again, I'm just going to put a bit of glue on there just to keep everything steady. Now I can turn it over and shape. So now I've got pieces A and B. And should look like a heart. Let me see, there we go. That looks like a heart now. So before I sew them together, I'm just going to give them a press. I'm going to press them with an iron to get nice finish on all those seams. So now that I've done that, I'm going to remove the paper. You can see it comes off really very easily, much more easily than if we had to rip it from the seams. So now I'm going to pin it in place. Now that centre seam, where it's got all those points coming together, is quite bulky, so you will want to have your walking foot on the sewing machine. And as well as the walking foot, you're going to need your 1/4 inch foot on as well. So back at the ironing board, I'm going to set that seam, and it is very bulky, so I'm probably just going to press it in one direction. I might try and press it open, see how I go with that. It is a very bulky seam. Actually, it's probably easier to press it in one direction. I'm going to have a good close-up look at that now. Yeah, not bad at all. So the final piece that needs to go on is the large triangle in the corner. We're going to pin that in place. And take that to the sewing machine. And now we're going to set the seam and press towards the triangle piece. And now the block needs to be trimmed to 8.5 inches. there you go. Congratulations. You have made the Be Mine heart using the foundation paper piecing method that requires no ripping out of papers. So I'm really pleased with that.